I'm going to talk about persisting and desisting in the criminal life course. So, what does it mean? Um, Desisting means to stop committing a crime, and persisting means to continue committing a crime. And these are some statistics that I found. Almost 60% of offenders convicted in 1994 were reconvicted within 15 years. Most reoffending occurred within a few years of the original offense. For example, adult offenders, 21% reoffended within 1 year, another 10% reoffended within 2 years, and another 6% reoffended within 3 years. It can also depend on the type of crime because reoffending among adults was highest for those who were convicted of breaking and entering, and that was a whopping 81%. Offenders convicted in 1994, reoffending was higher for males compared to females, 62 to 47%, and reoffending was highest among juveniles, that was 79%, followed by offenders around the ages of 18 to 25, and that was about 65%, and then those around the ages 26 to 35 was 61%. And according to Maruna, by the time the offender turns 28, around 85% of them stop offending. So some factors that come into play for persistence and desistance are education levels, vocational skills, and self-control. And these skills are usually acquired during childhood. If they had a somewhat negative childhood, that can affect them having these skills. Some studies showed that antisocial behaviors that have been found in youth subjects have been related to criminal behavior in the future, although not everybody is born with antisocial behaviors. Some people, it just happens, and if they had been abused or experienced a tragedy like a death in the family, they have a 27% higher chance of being arrested as a juvenile and a 40% chance of being arrested as an adult. And their brain can be affected, especially psychologically and emotionally, and it can affect the part of the brain that tells the difference between right and wrong. And an offender's education can definitely have an impact on their recidivism, because most offenders are only functionally illiterate, which means that they only have the reading skills of a third grader. And self-control definitely has a role in this, because if they have the proper amount of self-control, then they might be able to resist the temptation of committing a crime. But if they lack it, then they will have a higher amount of impulse, and they will commit the crime on an active impulse no matter what the consequences are. Risk principles assert that criminal behavior can be predicted and that treatment should focus on the higher risk offenders. Extensive research shows that risk assessment tools improve the accuracy of professional judgment about the likelihood of future criminal behavior. ARAIs, or actuarial risk assessment instruments, are an example of a type of tool that has been used. They're based on statistical models of weighted factors supported by research as being predictive of the likelihood of future offending. According to these studies, these evidence-based risk and need assessments have proven more successful than the other generation of risk assessment, and that's professional judgment. Oops. Both male and female offenders both go down the same psychological trajectories. Events that can transform an offender cognitively can be either finding a good, healthy, and stable relationship or finding religion and a good job. Because if you're preoccupied with those things, you won't be thinking about the last time you committed a crime. And being confined definitely has some negative lasting impacts on a person, because you will have more time in prison, more time to think about what you've done, and you will soon realize that time is precious and you won't get the time you lost while being in prison back. And this might make the offenders realize that they need to change their ways. And in our book, Maruna interviewed a select number of offenders, and only 80% said that they wanted to go straight or desist. And according to Maruna, the offenders he interviewed said that they stopped because they were sick of the lifestyle, or they hit rock bottom, or it was time to do other things, or they had no choice but to stop. And how they do that is by maintaining desistance. And maintaining desistance has two explanations, which are sociogenic and ontogenetic. And according to the ontogenetic explanation, the offender eventually ages out of crime. The likelihood of somebody committing a crime decreases as they age with the sheer passage of time, which turns them into a responsible adult. And according to the sociogenic accounts, a steady job and a healthy relationship are ways that an offender can turn away from their life of crime. Maruna is definitely a good example of a criminal justice practitioner. He interviewed plenty of offenders in his book about wanting to leave their life of crime, and definitely is knowledgeable about persistence and desistance. And I also think that probation officers can also help by offering their expertise and discipline. And there are some core correctional policies that are being used, such as anti-criminal modeling, which is when the officer models pro-social behavior and reinforces the offender when he or she does the same as the officer. And effective reinforcement is when an officer reinforces a desirable behavior of the offender and tells them about the short and long-term benefits of continuing that desirable behavior. Another is effective disapproval, which is when an officer doesn't like the behavior that's undesirable and instead demonstrates a pro-social behavior. And finally, relationship skills is definitely a big one, which is when effective officers possess several important relationship skills, including being open, empathetic, flexible, and judgmental, and that can definitely help the offender know that they're both on the same side.
And the conclusion is desisting is a huge part of decreasing
the crime rate, because they're stopped doing crime, so that's going to decrease it. And persisting is the opposite, because they're continuing to do the crime, so they will increase the crime rate. And a majority of offenders now and then want to desist, and the reason why they desist is they have time to think about what they've done, and they found a good job or relationship, and why they persist is because they don't know what their lives are without that, and they don't know what else to do, and they think that's the only thing they can do, is because they've been doing that all their life, and they might as well continue to do it if they have that name. So that was about persistence and desistance.